hope that this time my voice will reach you and that I will be permitted in his way to participate in your double celebration. Both events, the 10th anniversary of our American organization, as well as the Foundation Congress of the Fourth International, deserve the attention of the workers incomparably more than the warlike gestures of the totalitarian chiefs, the diplomatic intrigues, or the pacifist congresses. Both events will enter history as important milestones. No one has now the right to doubt that. It is necessary to remark that the birth of the American group of Bolshevik Leninists, thanks to the courageous initiative of comrades Kennan, Schachman, and Abern, didn't stand alone. It approximately coincided with the beginning of the systematic international work of the left opposition. It is true that the left opposition arose in Russia in 1923, 15 years ago, but regular work on an international scale began with the 6th Congress of the Comintern. Without a personal meeting, we reached an agreement with the American pioneers of the Fourth International, before all on the criticism of the program of the Communist International. Then, in 1928, began the collective work which after 10 years led to the elaboration of our own program recently adopted by our international conference. We have the right to say that the work in this decade was not only persistent and patient, but also honest. The Bolshevik Leninists, the international pioneers, our comrades across the world, searched the way of the revolution as genuine Marxists, not in the things and wishes, but in the analysis of the objective march of events. Above all, were we guided by the preoccupation not to deceive others nor ourselves. We searched seriously and honestly, and some important things were found by us. The events confirmed our analysis as well as our prognosis. Nobody can deny it. It is necessary that we remain true to our program. It is to ourselves. It is not easy to do so. The tasks are tremendous. The enemies innumerable. We have the right to spend our time and our attention on the Jubilee celebration only insofar as from the lessons of the past we can prepare ourselves for the future. Dear friends, we are not a party as other parties. Our ambition is not only to have more members, more papers, more money in the treasury, more deputies. All that is necessary, but only as a means. Our aim is the full material and spiritual liberation of the toilers and exploited through the socialist revolution. Nobody will prepare it and nobody will guide it but Bolshevik Leninists. I repeat, nobody but ourselves. The old internationals, the second, the third, that of Amsterdam. We will add to them also the London Bureau, are rotten through and through. The great events which rush upon mankind will not leave of these outclosed organizations one stone upon another. Only the Fourth International looks with confidence at the future. It is the World Party of Socialist Revolution. There never was a greater task on the earth. Our party demands each of us totally and completely. Let the Philistines hand their own individuality in empty space. For a revolutionary to give himself entirely to the party signifies finding himself. Yes, our party takes each one of us wholly. But in return, it gives to every one of us the highest satisfaction. The consciousness that one participates in the building of a better future, that one carries on his shoulders a particle of the fate of mankind, and then one's life will not have been lived in vain. The fidelity to the cause of the toilers requires from us the highest devotion to our international party. Of course, the party can also be mistaken. By common effort, we will correct its mistakes. In its ranks can penetrate unworthy elements. By common effort, we will eliminate them. New thousands who will enter its ranks tomorrow will probably be deprived of necessary education. By common effort, we will elevate their revolutionary level. But we will never forget that our party is now the greatest lever of history. Separated from his lever, every one of us is nothing. With his lever in hand, we are all. We aren't framed a party as other parties. It is not in vain that the imperialist reaction persecutes us madly, following furiously at our heels.
Oh, my name is Irving Crystal, and my son, his name is Bill. In my youth I followed Trotsky, and in truth I follow him still. But to call yourself a Bolshevik would fill the world with dread. So please don't call me a commie, call me a neocon instead. Yes, we are the neoconservatives, we rule the world, says I. And that dumb goy we call Georgie Boy doesn't understand how or why. Oh, we're marching into Syria, the fun has just begun. Comrade Trotsky would be proud to be known as a neocon. To keep the goyim pacified, for watching their TV. We let them watch dumb Irishmen like Sean O'Hannity. Bill O'Reilly and Chris Matthews, they can lick our boots and sigh, but to run the New World Order, no dumb Irish need apply. David Frum can excommunicate the Paleos from National Review. For to be a neoconservative means to be one of a chosen few. Oh, we're marching into Syria, the fun has just begun. Comrade Trotsky would be proud to be known as a neocon. Hammurabi's towers got busted during the looting in Iraq. But we're marching into Syria behind George Bush's back. They've got weapons of mass destruction, and they got them from Saddam Hussein. They've got weapons of mass destruction. Oh, repeat once more the refrain. They got weapons of mass destruction. Oh, believe me, oh, believe. If you want to know just where they are, they're hidden in Tel Aviv. Oh, we're marching into Syria. The fun has just begun. Comrade Trotsky would be proud to be known as a neocon.
This is partially true, but the argument is deceptive because it is incomplete. It is not leftists. Iran, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Egypt, Pakistan, and others. He wanted to invade nuclear-armed Pakistan. Keep that in mind. Shapiro wants to invade Iran, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Egypt, Pakistan, and others. Preemption is the chief weapon of a global empire. No one said empire was easy, but it is right and good, both for Americans and for the world. No, it's not. Ben Shapiro, WorldNet Daily, August 11th, 2005. This little piece of shit, this little chicken hawk, has been demanding that the United States invade Iran, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Egypt, Pakistan, and others, and establish a global empire since 2005. Do you understand what a poisonous little piece of shit this kid is? You know, he is far worse than SJWs. Far worse. He's actually worse in some ways than Jordan Peterson. Fortunately, he's never going to be popular like Jordan Peterson. He's not even popular now. He's just completely propped up. The American Bar Association already boasts more than 896,000 lawyers. America has no desperate need for another one. The U.S. Army, on the other hand, is currently 8,000 men short of its 2005 recruiting goals. I am only one of many non-pacifist, non-leftist Americans who believe that Mr. Shapiro would do well to heed his own words of August 26, 2004. Now is the time. Either put up or shut the hell up. And now you know why Ben Shapiro is slandering me, calling me things like a white supremacist and all this sort of thing. No, Derek, he hasn't changed at all. Shapiro is absolutely horrible. He is worse than the SJWs that he preaches against. He's basically a mini-me of Bill Kristol. If you notice the symbol that I put on this meme there, that symbol on the hat, that's the Fourth International. That's a Trotskyite thing. Ben Shapiro is not a conservative in any way, shape, or form. He is a Trotskyite. He seeks global empire. As you read right there, he seeks global empire. And what they're trying to, and if you notice, he wasn't willing to fight for the United States because he's not American. You know, he is an absolute racist. It's funny because he calls me a white supremacist despite the fact that I am repeatedly on record denying the legitimacy of white nationalism and pointing out that I don't believe in racial supremacy. Ben Shapiro does believe in racial supremacy. He believes in Jewish supremacy. You know, the irony about, you see, the reason that Shapiro goes so nuts when he's called alt-right and when he's called Nazi is because those labels actually apply much more correctly. Ben Shapiro is much more of a National Socialist than Richard Spencer. You know, neither one of them is right-wing at all. But Ben Shapiro is the one who is a global imperialist. Even Richard Spencer is only a racial imperialist, which I also, as you well know, disagree with. Why hate Ben? Did you not hear? Ben wants the United States to invade Pakistan, Egypt, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and he wants it to establish a global empire because he claims it would be good for America and for the world. He's lying. He wants to do it because he is a absolutely idiotic racist who believes it would be good for the Jews. Now, it wouldn't, and you don't have to take my word for it. Talk to a much, much smarter Jew named Martin Van Creveld, who will tell you that's absolutely wrong. So, Ben is not in any way, shape, or form of the political right. He is not a conservative, even in the twisted, pathetic William F. Buckley version of it. And so, now if you want to see how he was created, look at this map from 2004 to the present. Remember, he was writing these columns urging the United States to attack Syria, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Pakistan, and Iran back in 2005. Now look here. Look at how totally irrelevant he was. In fact, if you look at the blue, you notice how the blue is the second largest one. From 2004 all the way into 2015, I was more significant in the media than Shapiro. So was Molyneux, so was Cernovich. And then look how he took off here. That is not organic popularity. That is because he was created in the same way that Jordan Peterson was. And so there's nothing organic about his popularity. He's not popular. His books do not sell anywhere nearly as well as they look like they sell. All that stuff is created. All that stuff is manufactured. And so you cannot trust anything that comes out of Ben Shapiro's mouth, except when he does reveal himself occasionally, accidentally, like when he talks about how he doesn't care about the browning of America. Shapiro doesn't care about America at all. You know. And so, this is why, now, so it's like, well, why is he suddenly, I mean, none of this is new. Why is he suddenly attacking? Because he knows that I am one of the individuals most capable of completely exploding the lie of his Judeo-Christianity, Jerusalem to Athens nonsense that he's trying to push now. He uses the term Judeo-Christian 70 times in his new book. 70 times. It's a lie. Judeo-Christianity is as nonsense or Shinto Aztecism. It's absolute nonsense. And so, people like Shapiro are like SJWs in that they tend to project. He's trying to push this false idea of Judeo-Christianity. And so, Dennis Prager's trying to push it. There's a big push on for this, and of course, it upsets them because I've demonstrated repeatedly how completely false it is. And so there's no, I'm not going to write a book about, I'm not going to write a book about Shapiro. There's not enough there. He's just a, and the thing is, he's going to reveal himself. He is revealing himself. If you're going to, look, if you're going to talk about my mic, you're going to get banned. We all know this. Stop pointing out the obvious. Okay, there's absolutely no need for anybody to point out the obvious again. Clear? And so, okay, there, you just got banned. So, it's not that hard. If there are issues, shut the fuck up about it. Not interested in hearing about it. So, anyhow, there's no need to write a book exposing the neocons. All you need to do is read what Irving Kristol, the original neoconservative, wrote about what is neoconservatism. That's it. All you got to do is read that. There's no need for me to write about it. There's no need for anybody to write about it. It's all right out there. And so, anyhow, you know, when you look at what's happening, the reason that he's lying is because what they are trying to push is not possible. The United States is no longer in a position to establish global empire. I mean, this is what's, you know, slightly frustrating to me when people talk.
We all love and hate Facebook ads. Let's be honest.
Just the idea that this is not the end of the world and that they're funding the three most important agencies. I mean, it's maybe in your world, it's not the end of the world, but, you know, I've spent the last, 6 hours last night just surveying local news stories about this. I mean, 85,000 people are losing nutritional assistance in Arkansas. That's not inside the Beltway. That's in Arkansas. 13 Head Start programs are closing in Connecticut. That's not inside the Beltway. So for these people who are affected by these cuts, it is sort of comparable to the end of the world. And I understand that, it's great to wait it out and to, negotiate from a better platform with more power and the debt ceiling and all that. But those 2 weeks that you waited out are consequential for a whole number of people, not just in the agencies that the Republicans want funded, but many, many agencies beyond that. And I think we tend to lose that perspective when we have these types of conversations. And that's all I wanted to say.
Look, I think if there are genuine human emergencies, the Republican House should move to fund those relevant programs. But the entire federal government, I was chief of staff at the Education Department. I had to designate the essential employees when we shut down. And we designated, I joked to Bill Bennett, who was my boss, can we just say that no one at the Education Department is essential? In all honesty, no, that's not true. And that's too flip, because there are people who depend on education funds. I understand that before I get lectured by Sam. But the truth is, there are parts that really are. There are parts that are serious, that are urgent, and parts that are not. The Republican House can move on cases of genuine human emergency, but a 1 or 2 week shutdown is not going to be the end of the world. And if you can't go into the Smithsonian
unless you're on nutritional assistance,
there's a really it's not going to be the end of the world, honestly, even if you're on nutritional assistance from the federal government.
That's amazing.
talk about these things. When people are going on about how, well, are you sure that this is why can't this be, and that sort of thing. These guys are so dumb they don't realize that the United States no longer has the ability to do what they want it to do.
Welcome to Afterwards. My name is David Brooks, and we are here to talk about a book called The Neoconservative Persuasion, selected essays from 1942 to 2009. And the book was written by, consists of writings written by Irving Kristol. Irving Kristol is not here because he died last year in September, but we are joined by his son, Bill Kristol, who will probably need no introduction to anybody watching this. Bill Kristol grew up in New York. Let's see if I know your resume. Used to be my boss, went to Harvard University, taught at Penn, worked for William Bennett at the Education Department, Dan Quayle, and now edits a fine magazine where I used to work called The Weekly Standard.
Very well done.
Thank you, thank you. And so I thought we'd start by talking about your dad's life, because I think neoconservatism and a lot of American conservatism flows out of his life. And the first thing I wanted to ask you about was his upbringing, the social class he was raised in, what your, I guess, grandfather did. Right. Because I think those roots informed a lot of his writing later on.
He grew up poor, but I think he says somewhere, maybe in this book, that he didn't realize he was poor. But everyone was poor in his neighborhood in Brooklyn. Poor working class. His father, my grandfather, was employed as a jobber and a tailor, and I think fairly regularly employed, though I think in the Depression, like everyone else, he lost his job and may have had to start over once or twice. But I think my father had his mother died when he was young, when he was a teenager, but apart from that, I think he had a happy childhood, and I think very much of a sense that there was none of the class resentments that Marxists wanted to think that the working class should have in the 20s and 30s, and none of the alienation that later sociologists thought that, being a Jewish kid in a Christian America would cause. I think he had a happy and well-adjusted childhood, and then went to City College of New York.
Yeah, and I think, well, we'll get to this later on, but he would talk about, people would say, well, poor people think this, poor people think that. And he'd say, wait, we were poor. We didn't think any of this stuff.
Right.
So then he went to City College, a legendary place, and I talk to college students these days about City College, and
big a deal. I mean, he had fond memories of it, and he thought he learned a lot, having to argue with Stalinists and argue with other socialists, and having a sort of system of thought that made you, be very serious about the world and make distinctions and have complicated arguments about why the Soviet Union was or wasn't in the spirit of Lenin, and was Lenin itself in the spirit of Marx, and all of that. I think one thing he learned from all of that was the limits of all these systems and ideologies. He became pretty skeptical about.
Who were some of the other students who then went on to have great careers with him?
Well, Daniel Bell was there, a great sociologist who's co-edited The Public Interest with my father for several years and is alive and well, emeritus professor at Harvard. One of his closest friends was a man named Martin Diamond, who died much younger in the late 70s, but really was one of the key people in revitalizing the study of the Founding Fathers. He would be happy to be alive today and see the Constitution cited everywhere, really. I mean, it was such a lone enterprise when he did it. My father has a piece in this book. I was looking through it in 1987, celebrating the Constitution, and I thought, well, that was also 23 years ahead of its time. But there were many famous people who went on to be pretty famous intellectuals. People who went on to be famous in other ways.
Was Nat Glaser there? Was he a student?
Nat Glaser, I believe, was a student at CCNY at the same time, another famous sociologist. And I think it was a very good education, as you say. But I think this is true today in college too. Much of the education came from fellow students, not from the courses and not from the faculty. But he went through that, and meanwhile met my mother, who was a student at Brooklyn College, but they were both Trotskyites, so they met at some Trotskyite meeting, and that was one good effect of Trotskyism, that it brought my parents together. I have a personal stake in thinking this was a good thing, Yeah, but it was a very happy marriage, and
didn't end as well for Trotsky.
Yeah, exactly, right. He got killed, murdered by the Stalinists, but my parents got happily married.
Yeah.
So.
One of the stories I tell, I read this somewhere, that at one point the smart kids were all the Trotskyites, I think. And
Mostly,
at one point the Stalinites decided they were losing too many battles, so they said, we will no longer talk to the Trotskyites. And such was discipline, party discipline, even among college kids, that they actually didn't do it, and they all lived in the same neighborhoods. But that was, I don't know, I think college students today look at that period and think, wow, they really were serious about ideas. But I assume because they thought, well, the whole world will be Marxist someday, and so the distinctions we make now will actually have big effects later on.
Well, and I think the degree to which the Depression, I mean, and then the 30s in general, the combination of the Depression and the rise of fascism and Stalinism in the Soviet Union, and then Mussolini, and then Hitler, and then 1936 and 1938 with Czechoslovakia. I mean, the degree to which I think if you were in college in 1939, my parents have said this to me, I mean, they just thought the world was had fallen apart, and either was going to just continue falling apart, and then, of course, this horrible World War, and that it would just kind of go back into barbarism or chaos, or maybe there was some system that could get us out of this. But the degree to which I think everyone thought that all the views people had had in 1928, the more conventional views, you know, liberal or conservative, strong capitalist or mild capitalist, that those were all discredited. I think people really felt that maybe more than we appreciate if you were a smart kid going to college in 1935 or 36 or 37.
Right. So he's in this hothouse atmosphere, and then he goes to the Army.
Right, he moves to Chicago, where my mother was in grad school, and gets drafted into the Army, and goes over to Europe a little behind D-Day. So he kind of, I think his group, 12th Armored, lands in Europe, and or his part of the 12th Armored lands in Europe late in 1944. And he's in the Army for a couple of years, and most of it is, the war ends, and most of it is at peacetime occupying Germany, and then in Marseille, where he got to work on his French and read a lot of literature. He didn't have to, I have the impression he had a certain amount of spare time, and he was able to read, Camus and Sartre and all these people in French.
Somewhere he said he believed in socialism, then he got to the Army and saw the people he was with and decided it would be a racket.
Yeah, that's in his autobiographical memoir, which is in this book, and which he wrote in 1995. Yeah, I think he had a certain, it's easy to romanticize the working class and romanticize what would happen if only all these disappeared, until you actually get with a bunch of 19 and 20-year-old kids and you see there's a utility to having hierarchy, and there's a utility to having rules and limits on what people can do. He didn't talk much about the war, though I think he was really, I think that struck him, the degree to which, if you have a military force, that absent strong rules, there'd be a lot of bad behavior, including bad behavior to German civilians, for example. When he was in Germany, he was a Jewish kid from New York, but nonetheless, I think he felt some sympathy for these civilians whose country had totally crumbled around them. And
they don't know anything about it. Do you think Bill Kristol? Do you think Ben Shapiro? Do you think any of these morons know anything about military history? They could talk to Martin Van Creveld about it, and he would tell them, you know what, guys, your whole plan isn't going to work. It will never work. And so, you keep saying Shapiro's watered down Leo Strauss. What is your overall opinion? Strauss is totally full of shit. Totally. I mean, the guy literally subscribes to the noble lie. Strauss is the one who is actually as smart as all the neocons try to pretend they are. But he's just as dishonest. When you look at the United States is just a big magic box. All they see is it's this big, huge this country with all this power, and if we could just get them to fight all of our wars for us, we can sit back and be the masters. But it's not going to work that way. The United States is no longer capable of imposing will. We've already seen that in Syria. They managed. What they managed to do in Syria was
amazing. That's amazing.
Prove to the world that the United States is no longer capable of imposing its will anymore. I mean, Pakistan, what sort of moron thinks that it's a good idea to try to invade a nation that has successfully faced down India for decades? A nation that is nuclear armed. It's absolutely insane. And so the reason that they have to lie is because, number one, they need to hide their true intentions, their true motivations. Number two, they also need to conceal the fact that what they want is impossible. So, you know, I don't know what to tell you if you think that, you know, Shapiro is a good guy or somehow on your side or anything because he fights SJWs. Yeah, well, do you not get that that's how they sucker you in? What they do is they stand up to the really, really extreme left and say, no, that's too much. And then they say, hey, right wing, let us be your leaders. See, for free speech and God and Judeo-Christian values. Just lying. They're serving as gatekeepers. Neil Flesher says, listen to Daily Wire for 2 years. I canceled my subscription last month because of Shapiro. Good. Too annoying and too dishonest. Good timing for unauthorized. Definitely. Much better. Thoughts on Andrew Klavan? Klavan is actually what the true meaning of the term Judeo-Christian is. He is a individual of Jewish descent who has become a Christian. I've heard good things about him. I've met a couple people who like him. I don't regard him as a snake of the Ben Shapiro, Dennis Prager variety, but he does tend to spend a lot of time around him. So that is questionable. I would hesitate to dismiss him, just because, the media world is a small world and you have to, work with who you have to work with. I mean, you could just as easily say, well, Vox was at WorldNet Daily with Michelle Malkin and Ben Shapiro. Wouldn't be very relevant, but you could say it. But I would say with regards to Klavan, I'd be cautiously optimistic. Vox, honest question. Yet saying that it's honest is not going to impress me. That's what people who are not going to ask you an honest question will say that he will probably avoid criticizing his co-ethnics. I think that's fairly normal. There's not I don't think that stupidly self-defeating thing to do. Think about it this way. What do you think the reaction of the Chinese would be? Or the Pakistanis if they knew that was the case? Any nuclear armed country engaging in a first strike. And given the delivery times of, unless they were all on subs, there's no way that option could be utilized. So I think that is more likely a myth.
Buddy, who I still like, by the way, was dating Alyssa Milano, and then and his brothers got me so into E. Michael Jones.
I wrote the song about Aaron when he died.